You know the relationship is hurting you. You know you're procrastinating on something that matters. You know you're overthinking a decision you've already thought about 100 times. You know you need to set the boundary. You know checking your phone again isn't going to change anything. You may even know exactly why you keep doing all of it. And then you do it again. That's one of the strangest parts of self-awareness. You can understand a pattern perfectly and still feel almost powerless when it shows up. So here's the uncomfortable question. What if understanding your problem isn't the same thing as changing it? And if you like psychology that helps you understand not just what you do but why you do it, subscribe. That's exactly what we explore here. There's a quiet promise hidden inside a lot of self-development advice. It goes something like this. Once you understand yourself well enough, you'll finally stop repeating the things that hurt you. It sounds reasonable. If you understand your attachment style, you should stop chasing emotionally unavailable people. If you recognize your perfectionism, you should stop procrastinating. If you understand people-pleasing, you should finally say no without spending the next 3 hours feeling guilty about it. But that's often not what happens. You can recognize a childhood pattern and still recreate it as an adult. You can know that someone is wrong for you and still miss them. You can understand exactly why you're avoiding something and continue avoiding it, because insight can explain a pattern without interrupting it. And that distinction matters more than it seems. People who spend a lot of time learning about psychology can become incredibly good at describing themselves. I know I overthink. I know I seek validation. I know I have trouble with boundaries. I know I'm afraid of rejection. I know this relationship isn't healthy. I know I'm avoiding discomfort. And sometimes that phrase, I know, becomes the place where change quietly ends. Not because knowledge is useless. Understanding yourself can be enormously valuable. The problem is that recognizing a pattern can create the feeling that you've already done something about it. You find the perfect psychological term. Suddenly your behavior makes sense. There's relief in that. Something that felt chaotic now has a name. But naming the prison isn't the same thing as walking out of it. And walking out is harder because change asks for something understanding doesn't always require. Discomfort. Think about a behavior you've been trying to change. There's probably a version of your life where you already know what the healthier choice is. So why doesn't knowing automatically produce action? Because your brain isn't choosing only between what is good and what is bad. Sometimes it's choosing between what is unfamiliar and what is familiar. And familiar has a powerful advantage. A familiar pattern is predictable. You already know how it works. You know how to behave inside it. You know what comes next. That's why someone can consciously think, this isn't good for me, while another part of them quietly responds, maybe not. But I know how to survive here. You can see this in relationships. Someone repeatedly chooses people who make them feel uncertain, even though they desperately want stability. You can see it at work. Someone stays in an environment that drains them because the uncertainty of leaving feels more threatening than the exhaustion of staying. You can see it in procrastination, people-pleasing, avoidance, and self-sabotage. The pattern doesn't have to make you happy to feel safe. It only has to feel known. And this is where the question changes. Instead of asking, why don't I know better? Ask yourself, what would I have to feel if I actually did better? Because sometimes you're not avoiding the solution. You're avoiding the emotion attached to the solution. Leaving the relationship may mean facing loneliness. Setting the boundary may mean disappointing someone. Changing careers may mean losing certainty. Stopping people-pleasing may mean discovering that some people preferred you when you never said no. Trying seriously may mean risking failure. And letting go of an old identity can leave you with an unsettling question. Who am I if I'm not this person anymore? That can explain why a bad situation sometimes feels strangely easier than a good change. The bad situation hurts, but you understand the rules. The change might be healthier, but it asks you to enter a room you've never been in before. And your brain can interpret unfamiliarity as danger long before you have enough evidence to know whether it actually is. If this is describing something you've experienced, tell me in the comments what your biggest, I know but I still do it, pattern is. And if this is making you see self-awareness differently, give the video a like. It helps more people find these conversations. There's another layer to this that can be especially difficult for thoughtful, self-aware people. You can actually use self-awareness to avoid changing. Imagine you need to have a difficult conversation. Instead of having it, you spend an hour thinking about why difficult conversations make you uncomfortable. You read about conflict avoidance. You analyze your childhood. You journal about your fear of rejection. You watch 3 videos about boundaries. And everything you learn might be accurate. But the conversation still hasn't happened. Or maybe you know you need to leave a situation. So you analyze why leaving feels difficult. Then you analyze your attachment style. Then your fear of abandonment. Then your tendency to seek validation. And because you're learning so much about yourself, it feels like you're moving. But psychologically, you may still be standing in exactly the same place. You can hide from your life inside an explanation of your life. That doesn't mean therapy, reflection, journaling, or learning about psychology are bad. They're valuable precisely because they can help us see what was previously invisible. But reflection works best when it eventually brings you back to reality, when it changes what you practice. Otherwise, self-awareness can become an extremely sophisticated waiting room. You sit there collecting explanations, hoping one of them will eventually remove the discomfort of taking action. But what if the discomfort isn't supposed to disappear first? What if you've been waiting for a feeling that comes after the action, not before it? Maybe you've been waiting to feel confident before setting the boundary, waiting to feel motivated before starting, waiting to stop missing someone before letting them go, waiting to stop being afraid before doing the thing that scares you. But sometimes confidence is evidence you collect afterward. You set one boundary while your stomach is turning. Nothing catastrophic happens. Then you set another. You say no once and survive someone's disappointment. You spend 20 minutes working even though you don't feel motivated. You stop checking the message even though every part of you wants to look. And slowly your brain receives new information. I can do this. Not because you repeated it as an affirmation. Because you gave yourself evidence. So here's a small experiment. Don't try to change your entire personality after this video. Think of one sentence you've been saying to yourself for months. I know I need to say no. I know I need to stop checking. I know I need to have that conversation. I know I need to start. I know I need to leave. Now ask yourself one question. What is the smallest action that would make this knowledge real? Not another explanation. An observable action. Maybe it's putting your phone in another room for 20 minutes. Maybe it's opening the document and working for 5 minutes. Maybe it's saying one honest no without writing a paragraph to justify it. Maybe it's deleting one thing that keeps pulling you back into an old pattern. Maybe it's sending the message you've rewritten 17 times. Maybe it's asking the question whose answer you've been afraid to hear. Small actions matter because identity doesn't change only through understanding. Identity changes through evidence. You don't become someone with boundaries because you perfectly understand the psychology of boundaries. You become someone with boundaries through the uncomfortable repetition of having them. You don't necessarily become confident and then act. Sometimes you act while uncertain and confidence catches up later. And maybe that's why learning more hasn't solved everything. Maybe there isn't one final podcast, book, psychological concept, or explanation that will suddenly make change painless. Maybe you already understand enough to begin. Instead of asking, why am I like this? For the 100th time, try asking, what am I willing to practice differently? That's a much less glamorous question, but it puts you back in contact with your life. Because there's a difference between understanding yourself and building a different relationship with yourself. Understanding says, now I know why I do this. Change says, and the next time it happens, I'm going to practice something slightly different. Not perfectly, differently. And that matters because old patterns don't always disappear when you understand them. Sometimes the old fear will still be there. The urge will still be there. The familiar thought will still show up. The difference is that it doesn't automatically get to make the decision anymore. In the last video, we talked about how intelligence can become a lawyer for something you've already decided. But there's another trap that's just as subtle. Self-awareness can become the narrator of a life you still haven't changed. Intelligence can explain. Self-awareness can recognize. Neither automatically creates action. At some point, you have to become willing to behave differently while part of you still wants the familiar thing. That's where psychological flexibility begins. Not when every old feeling disappears, but when those feelings stop being instructions you have to obey. So think back to the beginning of this video. The relationship, the boundary, the phone, the procrastination, the conversation, the decision you've been circling for weeks. Pick one, not 5. One. And before you learn one more thing about yourself, make one thing you already know real. Then come back and tell me in the comments what your one thing is. And if this helped you recognize the difference between understanding and actually changing, leave a like so I know to make more videos like this. And there's one more piece to this that we haven't talked about. Sometimes when you finally start doing what's good for you, it actually feels wrong at first. That's exactly what we're getting into in the video appearing on your screen now. Click it and I'll see you there.